Hello and welcome to our webinar, Turning Your CRM Data into Relationship Intelligence. My name is Michael Sand, Senior Demand Generation Manager here at Affinity. I'm joined today by Colin Zeeler, a Senior Account Executive on our team, and Karen Fissman, Director of Business Development at Origin Merchant Partners, one of our clients. Some housekeeping, we'll send a copy of this recording to you later today. And if you have any questions, please direct them at webinars@affinity.co, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. With that said, I'm excited to get started. So Colin and Karen, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. And thank you, Karen, for joining us today. I'm excited to learn more about your usage of Affinity.
Sure.
Just to kick things off, could you give us a brief overview of your role at Origin Merchant?
Yeah, my role is I'm the relationship person at the firm. I build relationships with capital providers. I do some deal origination work. So yeah, tracking and knowing who's connected with whom is key. That's a relevant part of my role for Affinity's purposes.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And how long has your team been using Affinity?
Less than a year. And I'm thankful every day, and genuinely thankful every day that it's part of our platform.
Awesome. Curious, how are you guys tracking your working relationships and business processes before Affinity?
So I'm sure not dissimilar to many others in our peer group. I mean, we're an independent investment bank. We used a combination, we had a shared drive and we used a combination of Excel spreadsheets. I will say the old style Rolodexes, business cards, but I'd say the primary source of tracking would have been Excel spreadsheets. That's what we would use for our buyers lists and, assorted other things.
Got it. And what were some of the biggest challenges of using Excel?
Just centralizing data, knowing who so we'd have a new deal come in, and then figuring out who knew where the buyers list was from the last similar deal. That was one challenge. The other is we're actually a firm comprised of veteran bankers, and so there are a lot of deep relationships that go back years. So the challenge very often when I or anyone else in the firm wants to reach out to a theoretically new relationship, there's already a connection existing at the firm. So prior to getting on Affinity, the challenge was figuring out if the relationship existed and who had it before, just doing a cold call. So those two are two of the bigger challenges that we faced.
Okay. And were there other things that you guys saw in Affinity that convinced you to make the switch?
I guess the one thing, where the other area where we tracked our relationships was in our email, in our Outlook. And so, there would of course be a challenge. So a partner would know that he or she had spoken to X 4 years ago, that they'd had email conversations through the years, and now X is ready to actually talk to us about an exit or talk to us about a financing raise. And there would be the challenge of, okay, did I talk to X in 2018? Is it still in my email? Did I delete it? So that would have been another, because we're 10 years old, and in M&A, well, investment banking, the relationships, the timeline to get to a deal, it's all about relationships and building them over the long term. So very often, a conversation that would happen 5 or 6 years ago would only translate into a transaction 5 or 6 years later.
Right. So, sounds very familiar. We're very familiar with that story. As you know, one of the big differentiators for Affinity compared to other platforms or Excel is the automation that we provide. I'm curious if you were to estimate how much time, if any, Affinity is saved for your team on a daily, weekly basis.
Well, I can't really quantify that. What I can say is that Yeah, I can't quantify that for our team, but what I can say is that it feels like it's made things a whole lot easier. So before I jump on a phone call with anyone, I look at Affinity to see who spoke to them last. Oftentimes it was actually me, and and then I can refresh my memory. What did we talk about? Hopefully, I've added notes after my last meeting. So, while I can't quantify how much time it's actually saved us, it makes life a lot easier day to day, especially in a role like mine or in any of the partners' roles where they're constantly, having those conversations around relationship building.
Makes sense. And the other part of our automation, apart from just tracking those people and companies that your team's talking to, is enriching them with more data as well. Do you have any examples or ways that our data enrichment has helped improve your processes as well?
No, sorry, I wish I could say otherwise, but in that regard, no. I mean, we don't have some of the plugins at this point that might be more helpful. I might make more of a one-stop shopping kind of platform for us. But that's so most of the information that I find useful is our own. That part, I haven't really benefited from the data enrichment at this stage.
Got it. Okay. And then in regards to our relationship intelligence, which you were already talking about earlier, and helping you guys know who's talked to who and who knows each other, what are, if any, some of the strategy benefits that you guys have seen leveraging that relationship intelligence as it pertains to your target contacts and organizations?
Well, for example, I'll give you a couple of, actually one example is our post-deal marketing. Instead of just aggregating a list of companies in a similar sector to the company in the deal that we just closed the deal in, we can now, I'll look at those companies and actually look to see, once again, going back to the being able to see who is connected to whom, which is really helpful. And I wouldn't have had the benefit nor the time to go through a list of prospects and say, oh, I'm just going to send out an email on this one and see if anyone's connected this one. So I think that is a great use case. It helps us. It helps us enrich our post-deal marketing because we can immediately see, I can send a message to someone instead of it being purely a cold call. I can say, hey, I know you've spoken with Charlie, or I know you've spoken with Jim. Just following up, wanted to let you know, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, if there's a prior connection, we're much likely to get a response.
Right. Those warm introductions can go a long way.
Absolutely.
People like to.
It helps us find our way to the warm introductions.
Got it. And do you think any of those introductions or connections have led to any new mandates that your team is working on from your collective network?
Well, it's too early to say because it takes. I mean, like I said at the start. I mean, look, if someone's been building their business over 20 years, even if there's a warm connection, they're not immediately going to say, hey, Karen, yeah, I had this conversation with Jim 4 years ago. Please sell my business. I mean, there's a lot of time invested. So new mandates, no. New relationships, I'd say yes.
Right. Awesome. You were talking earlier about how long these deals, mandates can take to develop. Once they do decide to work with Origin merchant partners, how long does the process take from there, like once they become a client?
Well, it depends on what they're doing, but typically if it's a sell-side mandate, then it would be anywhere from 6 months to 9-ish. And there are a variety of factors that'll determine how long the actual sale process takes, if it's a sale process.
Sure, and that makes sense. Is it during that 6 months, a year-long process, is it typically the same person on your team working on the mandate that secured it from start to finish, or are there multiple people within your team working on that same engagement?
Yeah, so we always have a single deal team. So if I bring in a new opportunity, a new deal opportunity, I don't do deal work, and so then that deal would be turned over to the principals that have expertise in the sector, along with their deal team. But very often, because of the depths of relationships across our firm, a partner will bring in, or we the part when I say partner in principal, just FYI, interchangeably, they're the same for our purposes. But if a partner brings in a deal, he or she'll work on that deal along with his or her deal team.
Got it.
Through the whole course of the sale process.
Right, from soup to nuts, as they say.
Yeah.
Awesome. And kind of last question along securing the mandates. What ways, if any, has Affinity helped you when identifying and pursuing mandates in the first place?
Well, I think I've already answered that question to a certain extent. The relationships in our business are key. So just knowing who we've spoken to historically, where the connections are, what we spoke about, all of those things are only helpful in advancing relationships, which in turn helps us to advance towards a mandate being secured.
Right, it's a holistic approach from beginning to end.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Awesome. So just a couple other questions here before we wrap up. And again, really appreciate you taking the time to do this with us today. In terms of your process for like building buyers lists, you touched on it earlier of maybe not having those Excel files or in your prospecting efforts, being the director of business development. How has Affinity impacted that process for you guys?
Well, we now have our buyers lists all on one platform. It's very easy to, those lists are really easy to find. You added a feature a while back, the group email, which I've found really useful to follow up. So once a deal gets done, I feel like if I were on the other side, I would want to know what the outcome was. So, I've used that feature. Affinity makes it very easy. Once the buyers list is in there, I can email directly from the buyers list to let people know. And if you want to have a follow-up conversation, just respond to this email and we can set up a time. So I find that aspect, and look, I'm talking from my point of view, which is business development. I'm not on like I said, on the execution side. Mm-hmm. I think the analysts and associates that are actually, building the buyers list, it makes it easier for them as well, because they're not emailing or yelling over the desk to their buddy, hey, Christina, do you remember this deal? Do you know where the buyers list is? They just look in Affinity. So it makes it very easy to find similar lists, and that streamlining the process, because we do a lot of, I hate to use the word bespoke because it's so overused, but we do try to tailor as best we can. Like every business is unique, every process is a little bit different, but there's some things that we can use, we can draw on from our past experiences, and a buyers list is one. We may add, subtract, but it's great to have that starting point and know where it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's always helpful to not have to start from scratch each time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. So all these improvements sound amazing. I guess kind of last question would be to help tie all this together in terms of your own internal tracking of your processes and those streamlining efforts in terms of report generation, both for your team internally, but also in preparing for your customer engagements. What changes have been made there or improvements?
So, look, we're still moving up the learning curve and understanding how we can fully leverage the platform. I will say what we haven't, we haven't been using the reporting function a lot. What we do now is we track our prospects in Affinity. And so again, making it really easy to see kind of from from remote prospect through to closed deal, who we've worked with, who we might work with, where the possibilities lie, which principles are involved with these companies, where again, going back to where the relationships lie. So that's been another helpful element, just in having a kind of a funnel in one place rather than, again, in the Excel spreadsheet.
Right. Well, that all makes sense and is wonderful to hear. Again, really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us or our audience today about Affinity?
Yeah, I'm really surprised you didn't ask. But the reason that we chose Affinity is because of the data, the automated content. I'm going to call it content aggregation. I'm a content person, but so I work in a firm where, you know, like, let's call it what it is. Like the partners are boomer demographic. You know, I mean, we're all in, like, call it 40s to 60s, and there was a lot of resistance to CRM where there was going to be a lot of data entry required. So, you know, when we were going through this exercise, like, one of the things we were struggling with was the question, is anyone actually going to use this thing? And what I really appreciate about this platform and why I was so drawn to it was because as long as everyone's logged in, which they are, I can still have the benefit of their information. You know, sure, they can set their privacy settings how they like, but I can still see who is connected to whom. So I don't need, I'm not going to name any names. I don't need X to enter all of his contacts for me to know that he's connected with this person that I want to reach out to. So that I think, like, that's a huge feature for us. We wouldn't have tried the platform if that feature didn't exist. So yeah, that's what I'd like to add.
Yeah, and then thank you for adding that. Our automation is our, you know, bread and butter secret sauce. And we have a saying here that automation leads to better accuracy, and because it's more accurate, much higher levels of adoption across the team. So, you know, not just becoming shelfware that your team doesn't use.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that was the fear, and we just, you know, we, like I said, even those that don't use it still are using it,
Okay.
and we have the benefit. Yeah.